Viewers, artists, welcome to another stream of the Art Lounge Alley. This is Drawing Comics, part 37. I am your host, and here is what we're going to be doing today. Continuation of beautiful work done by John Buscema. This is another project of mine is to draw the entire comic book from page to page, cover to cover, learning from this amazing artist. If you guys aren't familiar with John Buscema, I highly encourage you guys to check out the first stream of Drawing Comics. You guys can access that by going to the videos section in the Twitch channel and filtering based on collection. And there you'll see a folder. It's a highlight folder. And over there I post all special intros, including the intro that I'm talking about right now. It's a short flick that I made about John Buscema, giving you guys a better idea of who he is, where he started out, and where he ended up being, as well as like examples of his work, stuff that hasn't been posted, isn't rotating around mainstream media. It's some of his forgotten sketches. I'm going to say quote unquote forgotten, but they aren't. And just beautiful work that he's done throughout the years, including his time in Marvel. And just giving you guys a better understanding of who he is in his personal life as well, and how much work he's done. It's a cool little flick. You guys should check that out to get a little bit more familiar with John Buscema's. And I highly encourage you guys to search out his comics, just to see all the beautiful work that he's done. So far I am halfway through this comic. I'm getting closer and closer towards the end. I'm not going to show you guys too much about it, but I think that there's so much to learn from his work, and just drawing from comics in general. If you've never really you never produced a comic book, if you're looking to get into comic books, this is an excellent way to do it, because it is constantly you have something to work on constantly. Sometimes it can be intimidating if you are just starting out, or if you're an intermediate, or somewhere in intermediate advanced looking into jumping into comics, or even beginner. The best thing you can do is get your feet wet by drawing your favorite comic book from page to page, cover to cover. It puts you in the state of actually producing a comic book, so you'll know what you need to do. What are some of the things that you're going to have to consider? For example, should you sketch out all the panels first, making sure that all the panels are designed in the way that you want them to tell the story. Things like composition, things like face expressions, things like body language, things like camera angles, perspectives. All of that is already there for you, so you don't have to sit there and really come up with all the stuff. If you're kind of new to the game, you have something to practice. Every day you could sit down and you could do this. The battle is halfway there already. You're not struggling to come up with, like, okay, I have to come up with characters, I have to come up with perspective, I have to tell the story from panel to panel in an interesting way. It becomes overwhelming and intimidating. But drawing from comics kind of rules all that out, and what you are left with is practicing all those things, getting a better understanding of all those things, memorizing all these things, so that next time you sit down, you create panel work. You could be like, oh yeah, I remember that there was like a panned out kind of shot, the zoomed out shot perspective of the characters. Then the next panel was the face was in the foreground while the other character is in the background, etc., etc. So those kind of things end up staying with you. They kind of stick with you. Certain face expressions, action poses, all of that is there for you, and you just have to internalize that. You have to continuously dedicate yourself to practice day after day after day. And it's an example that I like to give when it comes to this is like watercolor. You know, the learning process is kind of like watercolor. And I'll give you guys an example of what I mean once I find my pencil and I start working. So I'm going to continue on with this panel. I'm going to try to define it more. There's definitely more to do. But yeah, getting back to that point, it's kind of like watercolor. Learning to draw, or just the learning process, is very similar, because you could just do one layer, right? And the layer being you sitting down and practicing. So you could do that one layer, and then you could just leave it alone. And over time, it's going to fade, right? That layer is going to fade. It's going to become a little bit more and more seeped into the paper. You're going to see it less. And then 3 days later, you do another layer, and then that fades away. But if you sit down and you consistently do layer after layer after layer, you end up giving it more definition. You end up making it more crisp, so that when it dries and it's more defined. So that kind of is like a metaphor for the learning process. The longer periods of time you give in between each session that you sit down to draw, the more it's going to fade. The less amount of time that you give between the times that you sit down to practice to learn all these things, the more crisp it's going to get. You're layering things on. So you're going to get a stronger and stronger foundation each and every time you sit down to do it. You're giving it less time to actually fade away from your memory, to get less and less defined. So I hope that kind of helps you guys, or at least motivates you to sit down and do it more often. You know, I think that's the most important thing. You know, a lot of people stress things like material, or they stress things like, you know, this part of the drawing or that part of the drawing. But really, it comes down to just that. Like, how often are you going to sit down and dedicate time to actually improving and getting all this stuff down? That's what's really going to determine whether you're going to get better or not. Nothing else. You know, there's a bunch of things that I could say, but none of that stuff is actually going to help you guys improve. The only thing that will really do that is practicing, by actually drawing and dedicating the time and effort. You know, these are just here to kind of guide you, to give you slight, you know, shortcuts. There are certain things that you would probably reach to understand through a period of time. So I'm kind of trying to like speed that up for you guys. But essentially, like, it's you training your hand-eye coordination. It's you training your hand to be able to do all these lines. That's going to get you somewhere. And yeah, drawing from comics is really going to speed that up for you. It's going to give you the confidence to sit down and actually do a comic book, because now you've gotten your feet wet. You know what to do, or just have a general idea of like what needs to be done in order to get a comic book out, or to get certain pages out, or to start somewhere with them and go on from there. Because I can tell you, despite me drawing, when I first sat down to do my first comic book, it was intimidating. It was like, you know, where do I begin? And it was just like this bewilderment, kind of like, what do I do? Like, do I do this first? Do I do that first? Etc., etc. I mean, I still pushed through it, but having to learn all this stuff, having to learn all the process and everything prior really helps. So even though I have done comics, of course, I don't feel like I've learned everything or I know everything. Absolutely not. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the more I do it, the more I realize, like, man, there's this and this that I could learn. There's this that I could get better in. And to me, it's not disheartening. It's challenge, and it's fun. It's in some ways, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit, it's fun, it's challenging, but it's also kind of intimidating, right? Because you're wondering, like, am I going to get there? Is this going to be really challenging? Can I get through it? So all these ifs that pop out, but through dedication and determination to be consistent, you overcome it. That's a guarantee. So it doesn't necessarily have to be John Buscema's work. Pick any comic book that you really like, that the art that you really admire, and just learn from that. Pick up on their angles, pick up on their face expressions. I think those are one of the most important things. I mean, all of that is really important, but if you can't tell a story in an interesting pattern from panel to panel, that's gonna affect your viewership, and how engaged viewers are going to be in the story or in your artwork even. And face expressions add to that. So now I'm coming to a challenge here. It's an interesting perspective. So what could I do to make sure I'm in the right path or in the right direction? Well, one of the things that I really like to do, I call it the relationship between objects. So now, of course, I wouldn't call the mouth an object, but for the time being, in order to get this down, I consider face features those objects. For terminology's sake, to simplify things, I'm going to say it's an object. So how far is the mouth from this blanket that's on him? To make sure that the perspective is right, I'm following that guideline. So I'm using something else as a reference in order to make sure that placement is correct. Like, is the mouth in the right place relative to the blanket? And I just closely study that and pay attention to that gap in between the blanket and the bottom of his mouth. I'm like, okay, it's relatively this far away from one another. And then from there, once I get the mouth down, I ask the next question, which is, how far is the nostril from the mouth? So this one, it's pretty challenging because you can't even really see much. It's like little lines, and that just shows his dedication. Like, despite this angle, you could still see him pushing the right perspective. With tiny little dots for face features, but they're placed so well that perspectively they're right. Anatomically it makes sense. And I really commend that. And that's something that I notice with a lot of his panels. There's some panels where it's really zoomed out, where like Conan is like almost a speck on the paper, but he still takes the time to draw out features in a muscular form, so that way you know that that's him. Or just in general, it brings out more character in the panel because of it. So he doesn't take the opportunity to say like, oh, nobody's really going to notice, let me just put this little blob here. Like, no, he takes the time, despite it being like just a silhouette, to make sure that that silhouette looks right, anatomically, perspectively, proportionately, like all those things. And I really admire that. That is dedication. That's love for drawing. That it's not about just let me get a finished product, right? Let me just complete this so that I can move on to the next page. Like, no, I'm so into this right now that I want to make sure that even just this little detail looks right. I think that's so cool. And I believe anybody and everybody could reach that place as well if they push through the first stages of drawing. You know, there's a point where you really cross over. You cross over from understanding anatomy. It's like that concept about reading, you know, that idea of like the alphabet or whatnot. Like there was a point where it was very challenging and you felt like there was this like separation between you and understanding the alphabet, you and being able to read certain words, until the point where you really got a good grasp of the alphabet, and you were able to just without thinking know where all the letters are, pronunciations, everything, and it became part of you. You know, when you sit down to read now, you don't recite it, right? You don't like have trouble pronouncing certain letters or words. You just know them well. So the same thing is going to happen with drawing. You just have to really stick to it and push to get there. And I think having that example in mind is a great way to go about it. It kind of keeps you motivated with that idea in the back of your mind. But just like when you were learning to read, just like when you were learning the alphabet, if you didn't stick to it, it took you longer to do it, right? If, as I was mentioning before, it fades. Whereas if you did it consistently, if you read, you know, if you took the time to actually really put in the effort and study all this stuff, it became less and less of a challenge. And before you knew it, you were able to read really complicated text. So I just think that example really helps staying positive, staying motivated, knowing that you're going to get there. You can get to a point where it's going to be like the alphabet. You'll just sit down, you'll be able to draw the figure properly. You'll be able to create interesting, cool designs. And you're going to notice that with your dedication. And the times that you do practice, you're going to be like, oh, I really get it now, because I remember going over this yesterday and the day before, and so on and so forth. And I think it's just interesting how so many things when it comes to learning just kind of have the same concept. There's so many things when it comes to just seeing progress has the same concept as well. You know, if you think about going to the gym and exercising, it's, you know, expecting to see like definition and results after going to the gym once is unrealistic. You know, the same way as when when it comes to drawing. If you do it once a week, it's unrealistic to expect big results, you know. So it's just all these things, despite them being different from one another. You know, going to the gym isn't the same as drawing, obviously, but despite them being different, the process and the results is the same. You know, it all bottoms down to like, how much time and devotion are you going to put into it to see the results that you want. It's this cool, like, intrinsical quality to things. The same thing could be applied for music. You know, how many hours are you going to put into playing the instrument and learning all these things and practicing? It's just the same idea. So Conan's looking all right. I think I need to put my attention towards his friend, who's worried, who's there by his side, making sure he's alive. Considering the previous stream, I'm pretty shocked that I haven't heard my favorite song yet. It was so weird. They played the same song that I disliked and I skipped like 3 times in a row. Just in one stream. I'm waiting for the 4th. On a different note, I actually ended up watching a movie over the weekend, and it was Westworld. Now, I know you guys are thinking, that's not a movie, it's a series, but before it was turned into a series, it was a movie. And maybe a book? I'm not sure. But the movie is in the 60s. Or from the 60s, rather. And and it's the same idea. It's like a futuristic world where they have like this theme park that allows people to be crazy, basically, or savages rather. And they go into this theme park and they create all sorts of problems and stuff. But even though I liked the cinematography, you know, for the movie itself, and I liked the vibes, and the story was fun. You know, wasn't, I won't say it's as deep as the series. Like, the series really took it to the next level. Acting, everything. And I'm gonna say the CGI is great in the series in comparison. Like, despite me liking that they're trying to be clever, you know, they didn't have the CGI obviously, so they would use certain illusions. Like, there was a scene where they're repairing one of the robots after a session, and this guy's like tweaking the wires on one of the models or one of the robots' foot, But you look at it and it looks convincing, right? It looks like he's actually really working with the wires and he's like twisting them and trying to make them right or whatever. But you could tell that he's just holding his thumb down on the wire, and it's angled away from the camera, so it looks like the wires are sticking out from her foot, you know. And plus with the context, right, of like them working on all these other robots, and you could see like as the camera is like going through a certain body part that they've like managed to place some sort of robotic features on it, and it pans over to that shot, you automatically make the connection, right? It makes it more convincing for you to make that connection in your mind, like, oh yeah, he's working on her foot. But really they're just like holding wires and pressing it down to her foot while he's like using the other hand to adjust it. And I thought that was really clever. I like that. And the colors that they used, the cinematography was great, but the story itself was just, you know, now that I've seen the series, I'm like, there's no way I could feel that this is more, this is deeper in some way or anything. So not all remakes are actually worse than the originals. Like in this case, I'm gonna say the remake is way better than the original. Not that the original was terrible, it's just they really took it to the next level. And philosophically as well. Like I just didn't think that the story was rich enough. Like you could see they tried somewhere, you know, especially in the beginning when they're interviewing people and like making this kind of comment that a lot of these people who are going to these theme parks or whatever are the Wall Streets or whatever, you know, people who basically don't have a conscience, kind of like they go over there and they do all sorts of crazy stuff. They were paying like $1,000 a day for that experience. But as the story went on, it became very linear, and there wasn't really much like thought-provoking scenarios. But their set designs were great. I really like the set designs because unlike this series, they had different periods in the same film. So like there was a theme park for Westworld, and there was a theme park for Rome, there was a theme park for like medieval times. But for all those who like movies, I say give it a watch. It's worth it. It's fun. I'm gonna say it's like a fun date movie. Like if you have a date, if you got one of those like dinner dates or whatever, and guys are sitting down to watch another movie, it's pretty lighthearted. You don't like, there isn't much, but it's still fun. And if you guys haven't checked out the series yet, no, I highly encourage it. It just gets better and better. Like the first season was excellent. I loved the first season. They had a great cast. Anthony Hopkins is there. But a lot of the characters are returning in the following seasons. I just can't speak highly enough of it. Everything was great about it. The cinematography is great, the story is great, the acting is great, music is great. It's absolutely one of the best TV series out there. Like 2019, I'm gonna say, had some excellent series. Like Preacher was another really, really good one. Like I loved everything about it. I love the comic book, the original. The comic book itself is excellent, but the way that the series is done really, I don't know. I can't say that it stuck to the comic book completely. Of course, there's differences there, but the vibe, the attitude, the narrative, like how they told the story, they were great at that. Like they really nailed it. You know, the humor, like the weird, dark humor, and yeah, a lot of it was there. And I think Seth Rogen had something to do with it. I don't remember if he was like the producer. I think he was the producer. I don't think that he directed any of the episodes, but I was bummed out when it was over. I'll say that for sure. Like I wish it just kept on, or they just expanded or did more scenes from the comic book as well. And they changed the cast around, but they changed it towards the better. Like Ruth Negga plays the blonde that's in the comic book, like one of the main characters, the character that the Preacher is in love with, and she's great. She's such a great character. She was such a great actress in it as well. I really enjoyed her there. I think the guy who played the vampire, I think his name was Joseph Gilgan. Excellent. Such a good guy. Like, all of them were great. And I thought at the beginning, I was like, the Preacher, he doesn't even look the same, really, as the comic book, but really grew on me. He did a good job. So, 2 series for you guys. If you guys haven't watched either of them, you're in for a treat, and I'm jealous of you because you get to experience it as a new viewer. I've rewatched it, I'm gonna say at least 3 times for date reasons. Like I introduced it to a couple of people, but I was totally into it from start to finish. Here's another thing you learn, which is something I'm still battling. I guess I get carried away with the drawing, is leaving space for speech bubbles. That's a thing to learn as well. Like you don't want to neglect that. It's very important. But I have made that mistake actually when I was making comic books. I think it had the writer peeved a little bit But it was unintentional. It wasn't like I was like, oh, who cares? It was just like I carried away with the drawing and filled up the panel as much as possible. Now this panel turned out alright, but I still could have done better in terms of spacing. Like a lot of this I'm like squeezing in when there's actually a pretty good amount of space, like in between his fingers and the frame. It's a good chunk, it's a good amount of space left. But I think it has to do with the panel. Like I made the panel more rectangular when it really is in fact more square. So I could have just like shrunk everything down a little bit more. Still waiting on a reply from Canson about the paper, about the sketchbook. I sent out a message to them asking to see if they could recommend one, because it's kind of hard to find the sketchbook that I was using before. It really has excellent paper. And for those of you who are curious, this is it right here. It's Canson. But I can't find a sketchbook that's bigger than this. Like I really like this paper. I played around with all different types of sketchbooks that I've had, that I've used before, and I was like wondering, like, why didn't I take advantage more of those sketchbooks? And through that process, I discovered that this paper really motivated me to draw on, because it's really pleasant to draw on. It has this perfect texture that's in between having some sort of texture and being smooth. I'm gonna say this is like fine tooth or fine texture, whichever. But I don't want to guess, and that's one of the reasons why I sent them a message, is because I want to ask them like what exactly is that paper. So aside from the texture and how it feels, like the graphite, whether it's this kind of pencil, this blue pencil, or just like a regular HB pencil, it really, I guess, takes to the paper well. Like it's a very pleasant texture in comparison to the other ones that I have. Like for instance, this one might be too slick. You know, this paper is a little slick, on the slicker side, so the pencil kind of slides, and it doesn't take to the paper as well. And I don't like that. I don't like that like slick sort of feeling. But at the same time, it's not so textured where it's like the lines look really jaggedy, or if it's like, or it feels like I'm grinding the pencil, basically. It really is a nice in between, and also it's thick enough. So as you guys saw in all the previous streams, I've done multiple things. I've done watercolor on this. I also did, and then I eventually worked my way to, I did color pencil, but that's a given. I worked my way to India ink, which is what you see over here. And it's fun experience. It really takes well to the paper. So as you could see, nothing on the other side. It's just thick enough to be able to hold that. So I wrote them a letter. I'm asking them like, hey, what kind of sketchbook is this? Like, what's the texture on it and stuff. And if you could recommend me something just like it, but a bigger, you know, I want to say something maybe as big as this, or your 9 by 12, I guess that's like the next size up, 9 by 12 from this one. And I haven't heard back from them, so I might wait a little bit and then just order from a different brand. You know, if they don't want to write me back anytime soon, I'm probably gonna have to go with Strathmore and see how I like it, because their covers are they're getting some pretty good explanations on the websites as well. Like in the product description, I get to see like what kind of tooth or what kind of texture it has, how thick it looks, you know, whereas it's pretty difficult to find any information about that sketchbook. Might do a little bit more digging, but it's not looking good, I'll say that. So I think I'm gonna move on to the next panel here. We got like 10 minutes. Why not? Why not start start a new one? Also, what I don't like about this sketchbook is I'm using graphite. I'm just using pencil, and because it's so smooth, I guess, the texture or the pencil doesn't stay as well on it. You know, whereas I think if it's textured, it absorbs more. It ends up smudging over to the other side. That's something that the other sketchbook that I just showed you guys didn't do at all. So that's kind of annoying. And it's also pretty see-through. So whatever it is that I was drawing, even though I was using graphite, it's not even ink. So imagine what ink would be like on this paper. In fact, I'll show you guys, like, take a look at that. You know, I was doing some inking over here, and then it's just showing up on the other side, which is annoying. Like, I don't really want to see the other drawing while I'm drawing something else. It kind of interferes with line work, and it might even puncture through. Like, there's certain areas where it just looks like if I press hard enough, it'll just go through the other side. So that's boo on that. I don't think there's, yeah, there we go. It is a Canson, so it's a different type. I want to say it's the old one. It doesn't have a date on it anywhere. I'm trying to see if there's like a current one. So it says fine texture on there, but it's too fine, I'm gonna say. And it says versatile surface for variety of dry media. So I'm guessing ink is not right. Ink isn't dry media, it wouldn't work well. Yeah, if you guys are looking for a thick paper, do not get this one. Not good stuff. But I still encourage you guys to just play around with different type of sketchbooks to see what kind you like, because it really does make a huge difference. Like that other sketchbook, as I showed you guys, I drew all over it, and it was a really fun experience. Whereas this one, yeah, you could hear me complaining about it. I'm gonna say why not? Why not start on this one? I'm probably gonna have just enough time to create the frame. But it looks like a square frame, so I'm gonna try to keep it that way. Which is from 5 to 15. 5 to 15. Now the great thing about having like a clear plastic ruler is that you're able to see through and compare like the very edge of the paper to the line that you're going to make. And that way the distance between the two can be pretty consistent. You know you're making a straight line. That's one trick to do it. Another way is to just really line up the very end to the paper to make sure that it's straight. Like going this way. Because if it's leaning, you could see that the top, you could see more on the corner coming out. Whereas if you have it straight and parallel to that line, you're bound to make a straight line going this way then. So just a couple of tricks there in order for you guys to get pretty good results. Same thing here. I'm going to line up this with the edge of the paper to make sure that it's parallel, which is going to give me a pretty straight line going all the way up to this point. So I don't even have to measure anymore, since this has to be the same as this. Gonna connect the dots. Bam. Pretty good. It looks about right. I don't know. Something tells me that this line is a little too high. I'm gonna fix it. And probably have enough time to just do a rough, quick sketch. Trying to stick to the shapes here, paying attention to the distance between objects like his hand and the frame. So as you can see, his hand is pretty close to the frame. Then measuring her arm from his hand. So I think I did a little mistake there. I got it too far away. As you can see here. Still keeping it loose, not really dedicating too much time and detail. Remember, these are placeholders, so no big deal if things aren't lining up exactly where you want them to be. Still pretty confused, to be honest, by this scene, because it seems like she's trying to chase off this guy who brought him back from the dead. Like she says, "Be gone, damn you, demons, be gone. You'll not take him from me." Or it could be that she's like trying to fight off any demons that he spawned. don't know. Gotta reread it. Been focusing more on just trying to draw it. I haven't really spent as much time rereading this. It's been a while since I last read it. But yeah, I'm still paying attention to the relationship between objects, like the sword and the panel there, and how far away her arm is from that. And it seems that the leg is a little too... I have a little too much room for the leg. I'm gonna have to change like the frame size here. So like right about there. Can always straighten that out later. And again, all this is placeholding, so as I draw, but notice that throughout the entire time it's pretty loose, nothing really definitive. Just making sure things are relatively in place to one another. And with that said, y'all, gonna have to end the stream here for tonight. But fret not, I will be back tomorrow. It's always a blast streaming for you guys. And if you guys enjoy this content, just remember to hit the like and subscribe button. They both help the stream and help grow and branch out to more audience just like you. Tomorrow I'm going to be doing the project stream at 9 p.m. instead of excuse me, instead of the comics stream, so tune in then. I'm going to show you guys the progress that I made over the weekend for it. Pretty excited about that. And that's going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here at the Art Lounge Alley. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow.